All right, sweet. Thank you very much, Branko, for joining me. So we're just going to do a quick case study interview to talk about your work, our work together with coaching. So if you can just let everyone know who you are, your name, where you live, what you do, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so my name is Branko. I work full-time as a copywriter for Legacy Research Group. That's basically marketing writing for anyone who doesn't know what that is, not legal stuff. I'm based out of Florida. I've been traveling around the country a bit, but I'm based out of Florida right now.
All right, awesome. And so like what was kind of like your life like before we started the coaching and working together? Like what was going on?
Yeah, so for me, I had a few challenges that I was kind of like dealing with. Probably the biggest one was just procrastinating on a lot of things that I just needed to get done. It was kind of tough because like there's a lot of deadline driven stuff in my work, and my typical pattern would have been to work on something here and there, but not really. And then when the deadline kind of snuck up on me, then suddenly I'm in panic mode. And then I'm rushing, like a bat out of hell to try and get it done. So yeah, and then naturally that would just add a lot of stress, for me, because it's like no one should be operating like that, in my opinion. So that was one aspect of it. The other one, the procrastination also fed into doing things that were small things or just important things that needed to get done. And it was just like making myself sit down and do them. So things like just getting my taxes done was a big one, and stuff like that. And then the final thing that kind of tied into that too, which I guess adds to that distraction element, was like, I'd also just get irritated about stuff. So like the littlest thing would just make me mad. And then I'd sit there like ruminating about it. And then that would then just add to the distraction. So I couldn't focus. And so basically between those three things, that was like the biggest kind of like barrier to me getting things done and just feeling like I had control of my life and control of what I was doing.
Yeah. So like going to the procrastination, like, yeah, what was the impact of doing that? Like what was so bad about it?
The procrastination itself?
Yeah.
I think it's just more that it fed into, a lot of the time I'd have plenty of time to do something. And when it came to that crunch time, I would realize while I'm in that stressful, anxiety-ridden crunch that, oh, I really could have done this weeks ago. And if I just did like a little bit every day, I wouldn't be experiencing this right now. And so instead of like having these weird extremes of, super low, nothing going on, very chill, to then suddenly, boom, everything's gone through the roof and it's crazy busy. It's just like, I just want things to be more even. I didn't need them to be that extreme. And I wasn't enjoying it. So if it's not enjoyable, then why am I doing it? You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And was there like a specific moment, like a low point moment when you're just like, this is not working, I've got to do something about this?
Yeah, it came, I guess it came in different stages. Probably like one of my lowest points was when I was living in Portugal. And that was a few years back before I started working at Legacy, where basically I was struggling to make cash. I wasn't getting a lot of clients at the time. I had a bunch of stuff happen in my personal life. And I kind of just felt like I hit rock bottom there. And that was all like a big part of it, like feeding into that. And then the second time was probably once I did get this job and everything's going great, like financially doing great, lifestyle is great. Then suddenly there was also an element of, I don't know how to put it, but it was, I guess, like guilt around how good things were for me. And then that then for some reason would force me to procrastinate. I don't know, like, so like, even though everything was going great and I was getting really paid well and just doing really well for myself, it still came up as a barrier. So obviously having everything go great or going bad, neither of those were necessarily related to the problem. The problem was separate from that, and it was affecting me no matter what happened. So I guess that was kind of something that kicked off to me. I was like, okay, I'm at the point now where I think I need some help with this, and I should seek outside help.
So yeah, they're showing like everything's kind of going great in your career, and the procrastination snuck in. Was that a problem earlier when things weren't going great as well, or it just like it was a new thing that showed up? Okay.
No, absolutely, yeah. It's something that I've always kind of struggled with, I guess. Even when I was in school, whether it was high school or college or university or whatever, like it was always an underlying factor to me. I guess in some ways I just learned to live with the stress. And for a time I worked in a job where everything was last minute, so it didn't matter. So it was like I was in retail management, so like it was like day to day. There was always something came up, and that was completely out of my control. So I guess in some respects that was okay, and I kind of worked okay in that environment because I just had to deal with it. But I'm not in that space anymore, and I don't live my life like that anymore. Yet I'm still having the same effect, So that's where it was like, okay, something's got to change.
Yeah, like it had to exist in that world, and now you're like doing this new career. It's like, well, this doesn't have to be this way now. And
exactly.
It still kind of was, yeah. So, when it came to procrastination, like, what were the things that you were trying? Like, how did you initially try to handle it?
Yeah, I tried probably everything. I read all the productivity books. I tried changing habits. I tried changing my routines. I messed with changing my environment, using little hacks like things like Pomodoros and that sort of thing. And they all kind of like, it was all varying degrees. Some of them worked, and I still like kind of try and do them to this day with sort of limited success. There's other things that they work really well for about 2 weeks, and then I just stopped doing them. And so I think that was where I came to that point where I was like, I need something else, because like I've tried all these things, and maybe it's more than just the tools. Maybe I need something else outside of tools to help me with this, what I'm doing. So.
When you say something outside of tools, like, did you have anything in mind of what that might mean?
Well, coaching, I think just having someone to help me stay accountable to myself, essentially. One of the biggest challenges I had when I was working for myself as a freelancer was I didn't really have many deadlines. The deadlines were set by me. And if I set the deadlines, then they would always just kind of keep extending out, right? But I found for myself, though, when I'm in a position where I'm accountable to someone else, then I'm a lot more attentive and try and get things done sooner. I'm even working on a project right now where my current mentor, he's amazing. He's been able to work with me almost on a daily basis on the project that I'm working in. And I've been able to get so much more done with this particular project just because he was available to sit there and review my copy on a daily basis and give me advice and that sort of thing. This is a mentor through work, just for clarity, another copywriter. So obviously when I'm accountable to someone else, that kind of removes some of that resistance, I guess, because I don't want to let other people down, but there's this element that I don't want to let them down.
Yeah. So it's like the tools aren't doing it. Like, you needed some personal accountability, at least for other things to help you. And right. So what made you end up working with me?
Basically, I heard about you doing the coaching through Rachel, as we know. And she was getting great results out of it. And she was saying like this, and as she was doing it, she was saying to me, like, I think this is something you need. And I, for a long time, resisted getting any kind of coaching. So like, you know, me working with a mentor at work, I mean, it's through work, it's someone I work with, you know, it's different to me going out on my own and hiring someone to coach me. And I don't know why, I guess I had some money blocks in the past about it too. Like for me, a big issue was always like, you know, how can I justify paying someone else to sit there and just talk to me? Essentially, that's how kind of in my head, I was having a hard time justifying it. But when this came up and I literally reached the point where I was like, look, I've tried everything else right now. I think it's about time to bite the bullet. I was in a good space financially too, so I look forward to. So it was like making the decision, like, you know, I've got nothing to lose, you know, so, you know, I want to try it. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And that's cool. I didn't realize you hadn't done any kind of coaching before. What surprised you most about the coaching that we did?
I guess how much I shared. Part of that, the coaching, which was, I guess, kind of really therapeutic for me, was just being able to really dive in. Like you really ask some very detailed and deep questions, very personal questions. And some of that stuff, like I don't even talk to very close friends about, you know? And so I guess like I had some reservations about that too, I guess. Was like how do I kind of like talk to someone about this that I'm not maybe comfortable talking to them about? But I think what was beneficial to that was it really helped me find some of the underlying challenges and issues, like what were the root causes of those through that process. It was like a process of elimination, but you had to kind of go back into the past to try and build a picture of what's going on, you know. And it forced me to look at things that I didn't even consider as potentially a root cause or part of the problem before.
Yeah. So in terms of the procrastination, like what'd you discover around it as the root cause?
Yeah. So I guess part of that was I always had very high expectations put on me growing up. You know, and like my parents are wonderful and supportive people, but there was always this there's always this underlying, like, you know, I guess you're gonna come from an immigrant family, like they're all like expecting you to, you know, finish university and get a degree and you know, push you to do your best and all that. And so there was a lot of expectation, I guess, in that regard. And same with like my grandparents were like that too. And but at the same time, there was something, I guess with me, it was a little different. Like even in school, depending on what it was something I really enjoyed. I really got good grades, but it was something I didn't enjoy. I didn't do very well. And one of the common, like I was one of those kids that always had the comment like, oh, Branko would do really well if he just applied himself, you know, because I enjoyed just kind of shooting the shit and talking with people and, you know, sometimes being a bit of a class clown and that sort of thing. So there were aspects of that where I guess tied into why I procrastinate on things, because I enjoyed, I guess there's a lot of things I enjoyed more than others and that I would really focus on, and that wouldn't be a problem for me. But anything that I considered not worth my time, I guess was something that I kind of naturally created a resistance barrier to. And so I guess to like adult life, that would be like fun equals all my attention. Not fun doesn't equal all my attention. And so, so that was, I guess, something that came out of that.
Cool. Yeah. And then, so like through the work that we did together, like how did the procrastination shift? Like what were some of the lessons or key insights that helped you start to be able to manage that better?
Well, some of the procrastination came from a sense of guilt as well. Like I definitely had some guilt about where, for example, if I got my work done early, I felt like I wasn't entitled reward myself. It was like, so I'd always worked in jobs in the past where it was very restrictive. It was always like a 9 to 5, whatever. You had 10-hour shifts. You had limited lunch breaks, all this sort of stuff. And so there was an element of that which would make me feel like if I got my stuff done before like 3 or something, I felt terrible. Like I felt like, oh, well, I should still sit at the computer, even though I was working from home. No one was saying to me I had to like be on the computer the whole time. Like no one ever said that. Like my role right now is 100% performance based. So whether I can do my job in 5 minutes or 50 hours, like they don't care, because as long as I make the money, that's my job. My job is to generate revenue for the business. And so the idea that I had to conform to some weird like box time, it was still ingrained in me, and it was hard to process. And I even had my boss in the past tell me like, look, it's cool. You need to take a few hours in the afternoon, go do that, go walk on the beach, go do whatever, like that's, we do creative work. It's a lot of mental, it's a mental load. And sometimes we just need that break. But even then I found it difficult for me to just accept that it was okay. And I think another factor that fed into that too was that, because this was in the middle of COVID too, like I'm working from home, Rachel, my partner's working from home, and she's working crazy hours. And then here I am going like, oh, I'm done by this time. And then it's almost like I felt bad that I could do anything other than be sitting there working too, And so I think that was another one, big one, was like learning to accept that it was okay and that I should reward myself for doing a great job. And funnily enough, being able to do that led to me being more productive, so because I wasn't beating myself up about it all the time.
Yeah, can you tell me more about the beating yourself up and how that kind of shifted?
Yeah, so so beating myself up was kind of like there was a lot of negative self-talk that I would do. So basically, anytime I made a mistake, I would tell myself how stupid I was and berate myself. And it got so subconscious that I didn't even realize I was doing it. I even had points where Rachel turned to me and say, like, stop talking to yourself like that. But I didn't even notice it, because I'd be saying it to myself while I'm doing something, and she'd be like yelling at me from the other room, like, what are you saying? What are you saying to yourself? Why are you doing that? And so yeah, that was a big one. And I guess just like anything, over time, the more you do something, either the better you get at it or the more ingrained it becomes, as a behavior. And so for me, I just kept ingraining in myself that I was worthless, that I was lazy, that I was procrastinating all the time, that I didn't deserve to have time to myself, that I was stupid, none of which are true. But that was just something that kept happening. And so as a result, it started like just manifesting, I guess, in my own behaviors, in my work performance, in everything, even in my personal life. So I guess that was a big thing too. And it was good to recognize some of the exercises we worked on together were really good at helping me recognize that I was doing it in the first place, but then also how I could start counteracting those with more positive words, more positive thoughts, more positive phrasing around behavior and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and what was the impact of that? Like changing from beating yourself up to being easier on yourself? Like what did that lead to in your life?
I mean, it definitely felt like a weight had been lifted. It's almost like you're always walking around and you just feel like there's like this pressure on your back, kind of, like it's like I don't know how to explain it, but to me, it kind of manifests in like stress and like tension. And so like I'll get these crazy tension headaches. And so I guess that's kind of like how it would be. It would be like that monkey on your back, pressure, tension, and then your body starts reacting to things after a while, you know? And so I guess that's how it manifested for me. It was just like, just constantly feeling like heavy, like, but where once I started practicing alternate, like switching out those negative terms with positive ones, and particularly it was like recognizing things that I'm grateful for. That was big too, because like I found I would spend a lot of time complaining about things that I couldn't fix or that bugged me, but I spent no time recognizing the things that were great in my life, the things that were awesome, the people that I love, the people that I cherished, you know. And so and it's really hard. It's so crazy how hard that is to do at first. But once you start getting into a rhythm, what I found was, instead of like having this kind of almost like a feeling of looking down all the time and like kind of not connecting with the things around me, I felt like I spent more time looking up, almost like, oh, look, there's a beautiful tree there, or look at that bird, you know. And I remember we even had a conversation one time. I was sitting there, I was like, I'm just sitting here and there's this bird tweeting at me or singing this song, and it was beautiful. And I just noticed that. Like, I would not have noticed that before. It would have just been like a background noise. And so yeah, a lot of those exercises actually helped, and it took weeks. Like, it took time to kind of, you're trying to break down stuff that's ingrained, but yeah, I definitely saw a change there. It was really helpful.
Awesome. Yeah. And I mean, this started sounding a little like what you talked about at the beginning with, let me just scroll up so I can see it. Being irritated by things and then ruminating on them. So how did that change or shift?
It happened less. It still happens. I'm not going to deny it, but definitely a lot less than it used to. I mean, I used to drive down the street and someone pull out in front of me, and next thing I'm pissed for half an hour, you know. I don't do that anymore. Not really. I still might, you know, utter the odd cuss word, but you know, it's passed in a few minutes, you know, and then I'm not sitting there wondering about it for the next 2 hours, you know. So yeah, before it was bad. Like, it was almost debilitating, like, where I would sit there and I would think about it so much that I'd get physical reactions. Like, you know, it's like you're feeling the hairs prick up on your back. It's like you're in that fight or flight mode. You're ready to, you know, have a go at someone. And but I just feel like I don't do that, at least not as much.
Cool. And was there any like tools that you did that you found specifically that were helpful, or any other like parts of the coaching that you felt were yeah, specifically valuable?
I think doing the gratitudes was a big one for me. That was a good just mindset shift. But also working on the wheel of fear, probably more so than the wheel of freedom stuff. Like, it was more about like identifying what my triggers were for some of these feelings. And that process, you know, it took a bit of time going through it. We went through it over a couple of sessions, and it took a bit to really hone in on what the core challenges there were. But once I did, that's what kind of freed me up. Like, the guilt thing, that's where kind of that all came up from, was working through that wheel of fear, understanding that was an actual trigger for making me feel like I was lazy, and that whole process. So I found that very helpful. It was just such a great tool for identifying how I'm feeling in that moment, or what's about to trigger it. And just knowing it's going to happen gives you time to sit back, have a think for a sec, and go like, okay, maybe that isn't the course of action I need to be taking right now.
Nice. And what impact did that have on your life? Like, how did that help you in your work or in your relationships?
I mean, it helped quite a bit, actually. I found that um, I was just less irritable about things in general. I was focusing less on complaining because I realized that the challenge I had with complaining was that not only did it bring me down, but it brought the people around me down as well. And so, and I remember we did that, the fear junkies exercise, and I kind of realized going through that, I identified myself as one of those fear junkies, like it was almost like I fed off the negativity. And then once I realized that, I was like, oh, so I realized that I could be like the negative person in other people's lives and imposing that on them. And I think that was a real good trigger for me to realize, like, it's not just affecting me, but it's affecting other people in my life, especially people I really care about and I spend the most time with. So that was a really good, I guess, kick in the ass to make sure, like, I'm making some changes, so.
Cool, man. And how would you say the procrastination shifted? Like, what did kind of the workday look like before versus after in terms of procrastination and you getting things done?
Yeah, so before, my day would start with me getting up, usually late. So probably around like 9 o'clock. And then I'm a slow starter in the mornings too. So, excuse me. So I'm a slow start. So I'll, take my time to make my coffee, and then I'll wander around and drag my feet, jumping in the shower and doing all that. And then when I'd finally sit down at the computer, one of the first things I'd do was open YouTube. And then next thing you know, I found myself in the well of YouTube videos and suggestions. And, and I'm sure a lot of people also struggle with that. I mean, social media with their algorithms, it's like, it's so tempting and so easy to draw you in. And that's definitely something that YouTube was my problem. That was like, because I could easily try and hide it under the guise of it was work, so like, oh, I'm doing research. But the reality was, like, probably 90% of it wasn't related to what I actually needed to do, but I was just justifying it to myself mentally. And so I would go through that, spend a few hours on that. And then I would constantly do this thing where I'd look at the clock and I'd be like, all right, it's 10:30. Okay, I'll just finish this last video. It's 15 minutes. And then I watch the next video, and then I'd look at the clock and I'm like, oh, I've got a little time. I can squeeze in this other video. And then it'd be lunchtime, and I'd be like, oh, I've got a break for lunch now. And then I'd come back from lunch, and then I'd be like, oh, I've got half an hour, I'll just squeeze in this next one. And the problem was I would open a bunch of tabs too. So they're all open loops in my head. And I had to close those loops because it's like weird FOMO would kick in. I didn't want to miss out on what was on the videos, even though they're there forever. And so that would be the spiral. And then it'll get to like 2-3 o'clock. And then I start panicking. Like I get this anxiety starts building up, and then I'm realizing I haven't done enough today. I've got to get to it. And then I'd finally start getting into it. But then what would happen is I'd end up working through to like 6-7 o'clock at night to try and make up the time that I lost. But then that would affect my, I wouldn't be able to sit down and have dinner with Rachel, it would just drag on. And I'm also less productive at that time as well. So basically what was happening is I was using up my most productive hours in the day with stuff that wasn't useful. And then I felt bad and procrastinated so much that I then cut into my time when I should be relaxing, which then added more stress and more anxiety. Whereas through working together and through going through the process was kind of having this realization, well, like if I just got everything done first, I could have the rest of the day to myself, so if I could just knock this stuff out. And I did. I started shifting how I was doing things. So basically I would get up early rather than get up late. First thing I do is get straight in the shower. So there was no dawdling and taking my time. And there's something about that psychological trigger of putting big boy clothes on, being a professional, not walking around in your pajamas or underwear. And And yeah, and then so then that kind of like mentally set me up to like, oh, I'm going to work today. And then the first thing I would do is I would have whatever I was working on open already. So the night before, I would clear out everything that I didn't need on the computer, and the window would be ready to go with what I had to look at first. And so that way, there was no, like, I wouldn't have any YouTube videos open, nothing. And then I also implemented also on my phone, I disabled basically everything on my phone for the first half of the day. So that way I wouldn't sit, on the toilet looking through Instagram or, looking on Amazon or something like that. Like that just wasn't possible. Like every time I'd be like, no, you can't access this now. So there was a combination using a couple of tools that really helped me kind of just focus in and prevent me from starting the negative behavior, but also slightly changing my routine. And I'll admit there was days when it didn't work out, but just like any process, it took time and practice to get it where it was. And so it's much better now, I can say that.
Yeah. So, I mean, before you were working until like 7 at night, and what about after we started, like, towards the end of our sessions, after we were working for 3 months or so, like, what were you at then?
I mean, I was usually done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was usually done. Even today, most days, I'm usually done with everything that's important by 3. Some days earlier, which is awesome. But most of the time by 3 o'clock, I'm done. I still have, there's elements of like, I still kind of might take a break for a little too long or something, but that's still something I'm working on from a productivity standpoint. At the same time, some of that's accepting that sometimes I do need to take that just mental break, and that's a good thing. Instead of feeling bad about it, I'm just like, okay, well, if I'm going to take this time, then I need to double down as soon as I get back, And so, yeah, so I think that's been a big part of it. Also, just kind of making sure I get out of the house and spending some time walking around outside in nature. So every day now I go for a walk. And then when I need a break, instead of setting up a computer and looking at something else on the computer, which can then trigger that going down the wrong path, I get up and leave the house. So I'll go for a walk along the pier here or along the beach, or maybe I just go down the street. But just walk somewhere and disconnect from the computer for a bit, just to like kind of give me that headspace. Because I always find when I finish that and come back, I'm ready to get going again. It's just what I was doing before was I was getting off one thing and then just feeding myself so much more information that like I was just overloading myself and not giving my brain time to just kind of digest what I'd been working on, give myself some space, which for creatives is very important.
Totally. Yeah, the part that I remembered about kind of your journey and the work we were doing was like, at the beginning with procrastination, we were talking about more of those things in terms of like, okay, the strategies to set up and how to get to the point so that you sit down and you're doing the work. And what I remembered was, and like as we were talking about earlier, of like the guilt of, but if like just feeling bad about getting all this stuff done earlier. It's like, don't I have to sit here for 8 hours and Rachel's busy, I should feel busy. So like that was what I remember seeing the shift in you, was kind of when you like, it wasn't like, yeah, these other tools and those things were helpful, but it was also really like that. I know you had that talk with Rachel where you're like, is it okay if I'm just like, if I just fuck around all afternoon? She's like, yeah, what? I don't care. But it was almost check, like, was that am I remembering that right? Like, is that kind
of absolutely. Yeah. That was a good reminder actually, because that's exactly what happened. Because of the guilt, I always felt like she was looking over my shoulder and she'd be like, what is this guy doing? He's just wasting time. And here I am working my ass off. Like that was like the mental, she never said any of that. That was all in my head. And so, and I just remember saying like, okay, I need to sit down and have a conversation with you. And I basically was saying like, I need permission to be able to piss fart around in the afternoon if I'm done with work early. And I want to make sure that you realize that I've done my work and I'm good. I'm just like, I'm now using that time for myself. And she's like, yeah, of course, that's why we do what we do, you know, like, so it was just like having that moment of like, oh, she's totally okay with it. And so, yeah, that was a big one too. It was almost like I felt like I didn't need permission. I would never need permission for anything like that. But I guess for me personally, mentally, I needed to ask that permission almost. It was more about just getting clarity that that was cool, you know. So
Yeah, awesome. And then let's see. I just realized I was going to ask another question, and I'm like, nope, I already asked that one. We already talked about that. So, yeah, was there any other results or any other changes that you saw from our work together?
I mean, that's most of it. But one other thing I did identify, actually, it was really helpful to identify through that process was realizing that that some of the challenges I've been having may not actually be purely behavioral. And I started doing some introspection, especially after we'd finished our sessions together, really just assessing like, okay, so these things helped. I still have certain areas that are still come up as a challenge for me. And so what I kind of realized, in which I'm actually in the process of getting organized, I realized that turns out I might actually have ADHD. I just was never diagnosed. And so, and that's obviously, again, immigrant family, there's a stigma around the whole idea of it. And so, but the more I looked into it, a lot of these behaviors that I struggled with were actually, that's part of the problem. And so that actually, because we'd done all that work before, looking into like history and looking at my behaviors and looking at what was keeping me back, actually triggered me to go and find some additional help with that. So, so yeah, I've literally today I was going through, my insurance and trying to find someone that's suitable that could, help me out with that sort of thing. So yeah, so I think even then, like for me, that was a big revelation that it's like, it may not just be behavioral. It could be, it's something else too. I might just be wired different.
Cool. Yeah, that's really cool that you're able to recognize that and check that out for additional help if you need it. Yeah, and then I was also just thinking that another thought just came to me of what happened during our work together. I remember a time when you talked about like kind of taking control of your visa situation and taking control of the work that you did, like getting help from your mentor instead of like kind of waiting for him to help you.
Right.
Do you remember that? And you want to talk more about that?
Yeah. So again, I guess that I think the root cause coming back to that kind of procrastination thing was that I was letting things happen to me rather than being the instigator of my own future. And so, should I say master of my own future? And so, yeah, so I would be waiting for feedback, or I'd be waiting for someone to get back to me. And then instead of just like asking, I would just wait. And then I'd get frustrated because I wouldn't hear anything back. And that was causing problems too, because again, it was another thing to distract me from what I was trying to do. And so after like sitting down and working, because I was explaining to you, I mean, we had a few calls like that where I was expressing my frustration with certain people I was working with. And you just ask the questions like, well, what can you do about it? Like, what can you do differently? Or, does it have to be like this? Does it have to be stressful for you like this? And it just got me thinking like, well, no, it doesn't. It's almost like I'm making it stressful for myself, because instead of just taking the bull by the horns, I'm waiting for someone to get back to me, and kind of just realize that like the only one's going to advocate for me is me. Like no one else cares. Everyone else is busy with their jobs. Everyone's busy doing their thing. Like, I'm just another person in the machine ultimately. And people are so tied up with their own problems, just like I am. So the only way I'm going to get anything that I want is I just need to put myself out there and ask. And in some cases, might have to demand, it depends on the situation. So I did. And, I was having trouble with paperwork for my visa, and I needed my license renewed. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on. And we were trying to buy a house, actually. That was the thing. And I needed paperwork for the loan. And the lady I was dealing with was dragging her feet. And I finally asked her again after waiting a week. And I basically gave her an ultimatum. I said, I need this, and I need this by tomorrow at this time. Let me know when you have it. That was it. And I got it. It was crazy. Like, somehow she was able to corral herself and the lawyers and got the paperwork sorted, and it just all happened. And literally all it took for me was, instead of just saying, oh, when can this be done, I told her when I needed it done. And I think that's a great lesson for anyone who freelances and works with clients too. Sometimes you have to remove the options and just tell people when something's going to happen. Yeah, that was a big one for me. Just basically taking control that way.
Heck yeah, I like that. Yeah, and just like, so overall, like, how did your quality of life change? Like, we've talked about less ruminating and getting irritated by things, being able to finish work by 3 p.m. instead of working till 6 or 7. Like,
Yep.
What did that make possible for you? How did life change?
Yeah, it was great. It gave me more time to, help around the house for one. I was able to, it made it easier for me to be able to get up and say, you know what, I'm going to cook dinner tonight, and take control of that. It meant that, if we both finished up the day a little earlier, we could go and do something nice together, and kind of add a little bit more serendipity back into our lives, which is, something we've been kind of craving since we left Europe and, and Thailand when we were living overseas. There's just always some sort of serendipity to life, because you had control over every hour of the day. But then when we moved back to the US, I was in a, regular job, and, it was just like so many factors there that just made you feel like a little trapped. And it was realizing that, well, no, actually, no, we're not trapped at all. And so definitely a little more freedom there, a lot less stress. It just, I didn't feel bad for chilling out afterwards and, reading a book or playing video games even, like, it was something I used to love doing all the time, and I just stopped doing. And, it was just kind of nice to be able to do that guilt-free, and so I think that was probably the biggest thing there. It was because like me not feeling guilty as well basically improved my relationship with my partner too, because I was less stressed, I was less snarky, I was less annoyed, because everything was feeling good. I didn't have a reason to be snarky or annoyed or to complain. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, and so you've also been traveling around the US for what, 8 months? It's been a while. You guys just traveling around.
No, about 3. I think it's
3. Oh, yeah, that's it. Oh, I thought it was
months.
a lot more.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was longer too.
Yeah. So you've been like driving around the US. How would you say like the work we've done has impacted that? Like, how would it be different if we had never worked together? If there would be.
Yeah, I would definitely have found it much harder, with all the changing of location and being in different environments all the time. That would have totally thrown productivity out the window for me for extended periods. In the past, it used to as well. So, because there's just like, it's difficult to create routine when everything keeps changing. But a lot of the practices we put in place and the exercises actually helped me create a routine that wasn't dependent on where I was. So, so for me, sure, adjusted to some time zone differences here and there. In fact, it actually helped because when I was in a like a mountain time zone versus Eastern time where everyone's doing work, I could start a little later, you know, and so that actually made it easier for me in a lot of ways from a work perspective. So, so yeah, so that was great, and yeah, I think overall, just being able to maintain that control and understanding of what I'm trying to achieve, but also guilt-free, enjoying that extra time meant that like we could explore places when we visited them. You know, we weren't just working all day and then like it was 9 p.m. and then we're like, oh, I guess we'll have some food and go to bed, you know. We actually got to explore all the places we went to, which was amazing because that was the whole point of doing that trip. And I'd argue I was more productive over that time than I had been, you know, before. So,
Heck yeah, awesome. Cool, yeah. And is there, like, if someone was watching this and if they were thinking about getting coaching, doing like the 12-week sessions or anything that like what we did, what would you say to them?
yeah, I would say just do it. I mean, I get it. It's a big decision. You know, it's a big decision to trust someone, to pay them to help coach you through your challenges. And like I said before, like for years I resisted, you know, hiring a coach. But I can say after my own experience that having yourself as a dedicated coach, just having a dedicated coach to work through this stuff, you can't really put a price on it, you know, because sometimes that's all we need is we just need that third party, someone who's separate from your direct family and your direct cohort so that you can have a differing perspective. Because the challenge you have with family and friends and your partner is they already know you and they already have their own biases and whatever. And so they can say things like, my parents would just say, oh, you're just being lazy. Well, no, I wasn't just being lazy. There was other things to that. But, you know, and the solution always seems so simple to them. But when you talk to someone like yourself who like knows what they're doing, has experience, and is really good at hearing what the challenges are that you're having and helping you kind of like discover them yourself, I don't think you can put a price on it. So I would say this to anyone who's thinking about it: if you're hesitating for whatever reason, ask yourself this: if I kept doing exactly what I'm doing right now, where will I be in 12 weeks' time? And if the answer is you're going to be in the exact same place as you are now, then just do it. Because worst case, you'll have a much better understanding of who you are, and what's holding you back. But you're also going to get some incredible tools to help you, you know, that you can use forever. And best case, it could change your life for the better. So you have nothing to lose, in my opinion.
Sweet. Thank you very much. And yeah, is there anything else you want to share before we go?
No, I think that's it.
All right, sweet. Thank you very much, Branko. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Cool.